Now, journalist Amina Taylor joins me via Skype from London to discuss this development. Thanks for joining us on this hour, Amina Taylor. News reaching us now is that the EU has extended Brexit to January 31st. What do you make of that?
Well, Donald Tusk, the head of the European Council, there was very clear with his message that this wasn't so much an extension as a flextension, which meant that Britain could then make a decision about Brexit before getting to January the 31st, 2020, which is the date they've initially given the UK. Now, many of your viewers would have recalled with some sense of trepidation when Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that he'd rather be dead in a ditch than have Brexit be postponed and not happening on Thursday coming, which is the 31st. Now, many of his opponents are looking around for that ditch because though the Prime Minister is trying to maneuver this to be a situation where it's between him and Parliament. He's the one trying to drive through the people's will with a Parliament that's looking to block him at every case. Well, if you're a cynic, you could say, here's a man who recognizes he is in something of the driver's seat when it comes to the polls and how the Conservatives would do, but only if he could push through something about Brexit before the elections happened, which is why there's this rather unique chicken and egg scenario where Parliament is saying, listen, we're happy to discuss an election if you take no deal Brexit off the table, and the government is saying the opposition parties are being chickens. Come and fight like a man out there in the ballot box. It's interesting times, I tell you, very interesting times here. I'm watching the debates as you are.
All right, so there is a call now for December 12th snap elections. Where would you put that in the mix of things?
Well, what we have to recognize in the midst of this is a motion that's going to be put forward in the discussions today in the House of Commons, being put forward by the SNP, that's the Scottish National Party, and the Lib Dems to say they would want to call an election even before that, on the 9th of December, but not solve the Brexit issue before that. Because what the Prime Minister here is trying to do, the Conservatives' entire future is now determined by how they manage to position this Brexit question. If it looks as if they failed and Europe's had its way, they could be decimated in the polls, you know, by parties like UKIP, by parties like the Brexit parties and so on. So whilst the opposition is saying, we're not afraid of elections, we just don't want to do elections on your terms. And this is where we're at right now.
Okay, so for a lot of people who are following Brexit closely, this is the conundrum for them. So if he doesn't get a third of the votes to call a snap election, or if he gets it and there is a snap election, it leaves little time for the new government to push for Brexit. So what next in all of this?
Well, I think any election would now be firmly positioned within two camps. The parties that want Brexit and the parties that don't want Brexit. And this is what the Prime Minister is trying to do. It's almost as if he's really depending on this idea that he's seen as a maverick who's trying to push against Parliament that's stuck, that won't fulfill the will of the people, instead of this being a case about legitimacy and this being a case about actually you're not just allowed to run roughshod over legislation and over parliamentarians. You are in a minority government that's being propped up by Northern Ireland's Democratic Union Party, who are even saying they can't support the deal the Prime Minister has on the table. So Boris Johnson's running out of ideas here, but if he can push through this general election idea, then perhaps there's still some more fight in the Tories yet.
Many thanks to you, Amina Taylor, for joining us on this hour.